WHUR-FM, channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. Tonight, 3 out of 4 people will experience it in their lifetime. 2 and 5 will likely have it happen twice. We're talking about being a victim of crime. And next week marks National Crime Victims' Rights Week. And there will be a host of events taking place across the country, including in our area, a walk for justice, and that's happening this weekend. My guests will help us shine a light on the unimaginable hardships victims face and what's being done to support and uplift them, as well as honor their courage and strengthen the commitment for justice. We're also going to talk about the role animals can play in the healing process. My guests are Arlene Joel. She is the executive director of Community Advocates for Family and Youth, also called CAFY, C-A-F-Y, and Florina Carter. She's an advocate, and she is also a crime victim survivor. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me for this important conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Let me start with a few fast facts. A new survey by the Alliance for Safety and Justice finds that 1 in 3 Americans has been a victim of violent crime in the past 10 years. And the majority of victims of violence receive no support in the aftermath of harm. And many suffer wide-ranging harms, of course, including post-traumatic stress disorder, disability, chronic illness, sometimes even bankruptcy, depression, and anxiety. Now, before we talk about your story, Florina, and National Crime Victims' Rights Week, I'd like both of you to kind of share your thoughts about the numbers that I have shared. You know, those statistics, while they may be shocking, I would imagine for some, they aren't necessarily surprising. I'll start with you, Arlene.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you're absolutely right. Those numbers are shocking. And, you know, violence can mean a lot of different things to different people. You know, if my home is broken into, that's a violent act against me. If I get carjacked, that too is a violent act against me. But people respond to it differently. And so what may, you know, maybe if my house got broken into, it wouldn't be so traumatic to me, but it could be very traumatic for you. And so making sure that people understand there's a wide range of emotions and feelings that everyone goes through independently is just as important as people understanding where to go for services so that they can have a voice. And that's something that we focus on with at CAFY.
Yeah. Florina, you have a very difficult story to share with us. And, you know, I really appreciate you coming on and being willing to share this traumatic experience. And certainly, you know, I'm sorry to hear about your loss. And even though it was 16 years ago, I'm quite sure that you feel the pain of it, you know, daily, the loss of your son at, you know, by the hands of your brother, and also, you know, losing your father to suicide months later. And also your husband. Mm-hmm. My gracious. Even after all of this time, I don't think it's inappropriate to ask, how are you doing?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm doing better, of course. But the pain doesn't dissipate. You know, people say time heals all wounds. I don't know what wounds they're talking about unless they're basically referring to flesh wounds, but it doesn't heal the heart. And there aren't enough days left in my lifetime that will ever stop me from hurting because of the fact I'll never be a grandmother. My son was my one and only hope for grandchildren. And so I won't have any daughter-in-laws. So that's why the pain lingers on, because I think about all of the things that I won't have as opposed to the changes, the challenges that I've gone through. But it's basically a mental challenge each and every day, because the devil is out there working against people, and he's trying to get your mind and trying to maintain, trying to gain access to your mental status. So it's constant battle. Depression doesn't go away, and unfortunately there are many side effects when it comes to depression, and I've just had to get to the point where I have no choice but to accept it. And that's the thing that I think helped get me over the hump, is the fact that I had to accept it. There was nothing I can do to change it. My brother didn't spend a long time in jail after killing my baby, but even if he had, he could have been in jail for the next 90 years. It would have never brought my son back. So at some point, acceptance is that phase of depression that you have to actually go through.
Mhm.
I want to ask you about how you began to deal with this, because based on your story, it was incident after incident after incident. It was, one would think this tragedy happened and there were going to be no more issues, and you could just deal with the one tragedy and then the next tragedy. How did you deal with the grieving? I mean, did you seek out professional grief counseling? Did you seek out resources, or did you deal with it on your own?
Oh, I definitely didn't deal with it on my own. But, growing up, we think stupid things, we're teenagers and whatnot. And I never thought that therapy was for Black folks. I thought, other people had problems, but Black people were able to overcome whatever issues we were dealing with. And I had to pray. I had to give it to God and tell him, there's no way I can go on, Lord, unless you do something to help me. I couldn't deal with the pain on my own. My heart felt like it was completely shattered, and I didn't know how to pick up the pieces to move on. And I'm not really sure. I think I was going through the victims program, and they're the ones that actually recommended Kathy to me. And I am so grateful and so glad to this day that I was actually able to, attend their therapy sessions and, reach out to Arlene. And we've had an ongoing relationship ever since. And one of the other things that I've done recently is I've written a book, because I feel that if I can just tell somebody what I've gone through, a lot of people, they're in an unforgiving state. And I learned also that forgiveness was the major factor when it came to dealing with my sorrows, because if I wasn't able to forgive my brother, I knew I would have never been able to move on.
I want to talk to you so much more about this, and we will during this discussion, because I think that you are a wonderful and inspirational voice for those people who are really suffering in silence, who are going through these kinds of things. But I also think that it is important that our listeners understand what CAFE is. And so please, Arlene, kind of share what the organization does and how it works.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is, nobody wants to ever think that they'll be a victim of a crime. But when something does happen, we really don't know what the next steps are. You call the police, you expect them to come up, and everything will be over once they leave. But that's really just the beginning of someone's journey. And so our role is to help people navigate that path, kind of like, so what's next, right? And help them define what that is. Depending on, who they are, their environment, their support system, their family. And so we do try to offer a wraparound approach in terms of still letting people define what may be good for them right then, but also if they're not ready, to be able to come back to us when they are ready. So we do victim advocacy. We offer mental health services. We do legal support. We do court accompaniment, to make sure that people understand that their voice can be heard during that process. We provide court education, and particularly for children that might have to tell their story in that adult process, because we want everyone to have a voice, but understand when their voice is most relevant and how it can help in the process. And so we're there throughout their journey, really. And so some people, just may need, an emergency stay if they're fleeing a volatile situation. Some people have to face relocation because they will never be safe here. And so we're there to help them as well.
But, Arlene, if you just think about the DMV, and it doesn't take a lot to watch the news and see that there are victims every day.
Right.
So it's a lot to be quite honest. It seems to be a lot on your organization and on organizations like yours. I mean, the resources that may be required for one person or one family that may have experienced a break-in. And having experienced that myself, I'm not going to belittle that at all. The violation,
exactly,
the loss of sleep, even if you were not hurt. But when you look at someone who has experienced, multiple tragedies like Florina, how do you provide services, for so many people? I can't imagine the kind of workload that your organization has to deal with.
Right. It is a significant workload, but we have a whole host of partners. I mean, we're just one agency that offers victim services support, but you have the Family Justice Center, you have, Roberta's House, you have the state's attorney also assist with resources and relocation. You have the police department who has a victim services unit as well. So we're not the end all be all, but what we are is that place where people can come to say, this is what I need. And if we can't provide it, then we're doing a warm engagement with someone that we know can continue to provide that support. But from our perspective, we still stay in touch, because it could be now, it could be 2 years from now, where I really may need help and support. And we try to be that constant link for people. So whenever they're ready, they can come back and we can help them navigate whatever their services, whatever they may need. So that's just a couple of services that we offer, but there's a whole host of agencies within the county, within the DMV, that specifically focus on making sure that we help create survivors that can be restabilized, that address their mental health, that can feel safe again, that become self-sufficient.
Tell me about the event coming up on Saturday and where people can get information.
So our event, it's National Crimes Victims' Rights Week, the next week. And our event is on Saturday, April the 5th. It's Pause for Justice. Because what we do realize is fur pets are part of people's families. And a lot of times when people are involved in domestic violence, people may lose their homes because of violence happening. Oftentimes they cannot take their pets. And so being able to develop avenues and ways for people to get out of a volatile situation, relocate, leave the state, and know that their pets will be safe.
So hold on. I hate to cut you off because I've got to take a break, but tell me where you can find information and how they can participate real quick, whether it's online, phone number, and we can continue on the other side.
Okay, so they go to CAFI online, CAFY.org. The flyer for Saturday's Pause for Justice will pop up. They can click on that QR code and register. It's from 9 to 2.
And where is it going to be?
Watkins Park.
Watkins Park. Listen, I have so much more that I want to discuss with you, not only about the event this weekend, but Florina, I want to talk to you about your healing and your advocacy as well. So please stay with us. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation will continue on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. Tonight we are talking about crime victims. Next week will mark National Crime Victims' Rights Week, and there are many events that are going to be taking place not only locally, but across the country. But tonight, we are talking about support for victims of crime and how to follow up with the process of healing. And my guests are Arlene Joel, Executive Director of Community Advocates for Family and Youth, also known as CAFE, and Florina Carter. She's an advocate and crime victim survivor. Before the break, you were talking, Arlene, about the role that animals play in the healing process. Let's talk a little bit about that. I'm not a pet person, but this is not so much about pets as it is, can I say, furry therapy?
Yes, because pets provide comfort and security. And oftentimes, more times than people would like to believe, it's a barrier for someone who is trying to get out of a volatile situation for fear that their furry pet may be harmed and they can't take their furry pet. If I have to leave and go to a shelter, I can't take my pet. And so what do I do with that? And there's just not enough foster places to be able to place all of those comfort fur pets for the people that, that need a safe place.
But more, even outside of the logistics of taking care of your pet, talk to me a little bit more about the role that pets play in the healing process.
Well, it's security, right? It's that constant, unconditional love that pets often provide to people. That it's that sense of safety that pets often provide to people. And think about it, when you're a survivor of crime, that sense of safety, security, unconditional love has been broken. And so they become their lifeline. And that's why it's important for people to be able to, to be able to get their pets to safety or to keep their pets with them.
Florina, I know you have a dog. We can hear the dog a little bit in the background, and that's fine.
Okay.
What role has your pet played in your healing process? And before your loss of your family members, were you a pet person at all? Or?
Absolutely. I had a German Shepherd that lived with me for 16 long years, which is beyond the time span for for German Shepherds. And after him, I had a little teacup Chihuahua who lived for 13 years. And after the Chihuahua died, I was determined I was done with pets. So I got all of the stuff together that I was going to give away. And I reached out to one of my former coworkers who was actually a breeder. And he just happened to send me a text message letting me know that he had a new breed of puppies. And I said, you know what? I'm done. I'm not doing any more dogs. And he did me wrong because he sent a picture. The picture. I saw the dog and I said, well, I'll just go out there and just take a look at it. But I'm not going to get him, but I'll go take a look. And that's what I did and fell in love from the very first moment. And I was going to leave him behind. And I said, Lord, I can't deal with another dog, especially right now, because I was by myself. The only reason I actually brought the dog home was because he was born on my son's birthday, April 20th. And that was it. That's how he got to come home with me. So I think about him, and I've actually called him Stefan a couple of times, not meaning to, his name is Thunder, but that's how he made it home because he was born on my son's birthday. His birthday is coming up.
So let me be clear. This was a Chihuahua?
He's a Chihuahua now. The one that I have now is also a Chihuahua. He's just not a teacup.
Okay, because even, I mean, how big do Chihuahuas get? You have a Chihuahua named Thunder. That just doesn't even make sense.
Yes. You're supposed to sound ferocious.
Yeah, I could understand a Chihuahua being called Distant Rumble, but no Thunder.
Yes, he's thunder.
High pitched, distant rumble. I kid because I love. But look, in all seriousness, and this is, you spoke about this before the break, and I really want to talk about this, Florina, because you said something that struck me, where you said before you felt that you or knew that you needed it, that therapy was not for Black people. What was it like to realize that I'm going to do this and that you were going to be an active participant in that? Take me, if you can, inside the conversations that you had with your therapist, because I think this is so important for people who are still struggling with needing therapy.
Well, at the time my son, husband, father died, I was a police officer with DC. And because of that, I was required to see a couple of psychiatrists. I actually saw 5 psychiatrists on the job. And they were concerned because at one point they wanted to medicate me because they told me I should not have been able to get up, each day and continue with my active daily, living and whatnot, that I shouldn't have been able to get out of the bed, and they wouldn't let me come back to work. So I asked the psychiatrist that I was seeing, well, I get up every morning and I look across the hall and I see my son's empty bedroom. Do you really think that's therapeutic for me? So they thought about it, and they eventually allowed me to go back to work, but I was only able to work half a day until I was able to prove to them that I was okay to work. I wasn't okay, but I was okay to come back to work. So I did that. And then they also have the Metropolitan Employees Assistance Police Program. And with that, they're also therapists. And I got to do a one-on-one. The problem with both entities is that I couldn't really say what I felt most of the time because I was suicidal. I wanted to be with my baby. I wanted to be with my son. I wanted to be with my husband. And I couldn't tell people that I wanted to take my own life because right after my father killed himself, the job took my gun. I don't know why. I never proved or I never showed any signs that, up until then that I was suicidal, and I never told anybody. But I wanted to just say it out loud, and I needed somebody to listen to it and to guide me after I made that statement. And that's when I was able to do it. Kathy, I couldn't tell the job that I was suicidal. They probably would have never allowed me to go back to work. But they eventually took me off the street. So I wasn't on the street, policing anymore. I went into an inside unit, which is basically where I stayed for about 11 years until I retired back in 2022. But with Kathy, I could say anything I want. I didn't have to worry about anybody judging me. And I didn't have to worry about them, being so concerned to the point where they were going to report me to somebody else, hospital, or somebody wanted to medicate and sedate me or something. So I needed to be able to talk, and Kathy gave me that opportunity.
Was there a moment of breakthrough, or was this a process?
Oh, it was definitely a process. It was a process. When my son initially passed, my family members were here, and I thank God for each and every one of them. The bulk of my family was here. Everybody came to my house. Because he died in December of 2009, it was during a holiday. So a lot of people take off at the end of the year for the holidays and go back, after New Year's. So they stayed here. I was not alone. And then one of the sisters from my church, she actually came and spent the month of January with me, and that was fine. But at certain times, I just felt like I needed to be alone. I wanted to be alone. And then it's like after everybody left, I didn't want to be alone because I was going back and forth. But it took a process. It was definitely a process because I still didn't know how to handle the pain. I knew the pain wasn't going anywhere. I just didn't know what to do with it. So that was when prayer came in, and Kathy. because if it wasn't for the two of them, I don't think I would have survived.
Mm-hmm. Arlene, you're nodding your head as we listen to Florina's story. Your thoughts about what she's sharing.
No, I mean it's a process, and I think when I mentioned about being that constant link, the thing is you want people to feel like I'm good right now, and 2 months later if they're not, you want them to have that that place where they can go back to, and that's really what we try to do, build that rapport, that relationship with people, so that whenever they need someone to talk to or to be there for them, they know that they can come back. And so I nod because Miss Carter recognized that that was okay to do. And some people feel like I should be okay by now, or family members say, well, you're still walking around feeling sad about that, but that's okay, because everyone deals with violation, grief, trauma differently. And so to be able to accept that, whatever the journey is really important, and that's what really helps people heal.
Florina, you said in the beginning of our conversation that things are better now. We are some, almost 16 years later. What does better feel like?
Actually, I never thought I'd smile again. When my son passed, let me tell you what I did one day. I had a coworker whose son had just had a baby about a year. I'm thinking maybe he was like 6 to 7 months old. And I went to visit her. I didn't anticipate her son being there at the time that I was visiting. Mm-hmm. So her son actually came into the house while I was there, and he was holding the baby. Pretty little chocolate boy with a little bush. He was just as beautiful as he could be, fat little cheeks. And for whatever reason, the little boy reached out to me. And it was really, soon after my son had passed. And this was not planned. I had no idea that I was going to react the way that I did. But he reached out to me, and of course, who can refuse a baby when they're reaching for you? So, of course, I held the baby and lost it. I just broke down in tears. The mother and the father of the little boy didn't know why was this crazy lady crying like that. But the little boy, and I lie to you not, God is my witness, he actually took his hand and he patted my back. And I'm talking about a 6 or 7 month old baby that was patting my back. And I kind of felt that was God reaching out to me, letting me know that he was there for me. And it took a while. So when I say better now, I can hold the baby now and I break out and cry, because back then, like I said, I know, well, even now, I know that I'm never going to be a grandmother because my son is not here to give me grandbabies. But now I can hold your baby. I can hold my niece. I have a great niece now, and I have a great nephew. I can hold them and won't break down like I did in the beginning. So that's one of the, ways I've advanced to being better as opposed to where I was back then.
Well, I have to be honest with you, just kind of listening to the story, I've, trying not to have a moment because this is difficult.
Yes, it is.
And I certainly, feel, I feel your pain. I feel your passion. I mean, and because it was just, my goodness, such unimaginable loss for you. And I want Arlene to comment about this too, but I did want to ask you, Florina, what role do you believe that advocacy plays in helping your healing?
Allowing me to communicate and say what I needed to say and not to be judged. Because after my family left, even though I wanted to be alone at some time, I felt like they forgot. Even to this day, there are days where I visit my son's his gravesite, and I don't see flowers from anybody else. They don't call me anymore to say, we're thinking about you today, or, how are you feeling, or anything like that. Nobody calls to take me out to lunch. So it seems like they forgot. And that's one of the things that kind of disappoints me. I know they haven't forgotten, but I'm one of 8. And so I really feel that I know they haven't forgotten, but Kathy still allows me to reach out with them. But if I'm having a bad day, I can always call Arlene and I can talk to them. So I know that they remember because of the fact, like right now, she continuously reaches out to me, and God knows I appreciate her. And I need to tell my story. A lot of folks don't understand. When I initially started the therapy, one of the other things that helped me was talking to other mothers who had lost their children as well. Though it wasn't by the hands of a family member, still they felt some of the pain that I felt. And you see it on the news, and you hear about your neighbor, but to actually sit down and to talk to other mothers who's experiencing the same kind of pain that I was experiencing at that time was really a big benefit for me.
Arlene, talk to me about the importance of advocates like Florina and those who have experienced this kind of tragedy and are in the perpetual healing.
That lived experience is so important for other survivors because you initially start at a point where I'll never get over it. I'll never move, get to that next step. But when you can have a relationship, be able to reach out and talk to people who have, for lack of a better word, made it to the other side, it gives people hope. And that's how people get to take that next step, because they feel like, oh, if they did it, maybe I can get there. Right. And by them sharing their journey, what they did, and also kind of what they needed and didn't get, because then it makes me know, oh, well, maybe I need to, reach out and try to get that, because that's something that would have, helped her. Miss Carter is, one of our best advocates because of her, not only her willingness to share the story, but her patience in terms of people being able to, talk through their journey with her. And we have quite a few survivors that work with us, that provide advocacy or that mentorship to people who are going through, and that's critical.
It's something just occurred to me because we've had this discussion over the years on this program, not just with Kathy, but other victims' rights organizations. And, we see women as, advocates, as survivor victims. But we often don't hear from men. Why do you suppose that is, Arlene?
Well, not that we do get referrals of men who are survivors of not only like domestic violence, but fathers who have lost their children, to violence, that kind of thing. And they may seek out services temporarily, and may come back around, but men are fixers. And so a lot of times they feel like I should be fixed by now, right? And so it's leaving that door open for them to be able to come back for service. The other challenge I think that I believe happens is that, the servanthood, realm is so populated by women. And not that we don't, want to include men, but and we've hired several men, but it does take a sense of servanthood and not the approach to fix it.
That nurturing part.
You have to have that nurturing part and allow people to take their own path.
Yeah, because I would imagine, being a man and having spoken to so many wonderful women who are working in this space, and also those who have, like Florina, experience, the difficulties of loss. But I think that, sometimes, they do need, nurturing men to talk about the men who have suffered.
Right.
And that's another, and that's such an important voice because, men hurt too, and they have, children. They want those grandchildren too, like, Florina. And so it was just something that struck me,
Mhm.
that, so many voices are needed in supporting of these things. I did want to go back to the issue as it relates to the animals and the
Mhm.
role that they play. Um, is there a correlation between animal abuse and the abuse that people experience, Arlene?
No, the statistics show that 74% of people who are in a volatile relationship, that more often than not, their pets are harmed as well. And particularly if they leave that pet behind,
Mm.
because that's something that's recognized as something that I do love, and hurting that would hurt me. And and it's the same way, people are in fear of leaving their children behind because um, fear of them being hurt as well. So it's the same thing. Hmm.
Your thoughts about that, Florina?
Hmm.
I agree. I totally agree, because if I had to leave my pet behind and know that somebody will harm my pet just to get back at me, it's
Right.
something that would kind of like make me reach out to them. But
Hmm.
I agree with that.
Hmm.
Yeah, and certainly we have seen enough animal advocacy organizations, those that are recovering animals that have been abused. We've seen
Right.
this
Yes.
in DC, where there are these puppy mills, and these animals have been abused,
Hmm.
and the like. And you talk about the true innocence of animals, particularly dogs. um they're, and like I said, I'm no pet expert, but I would imagine, these animals are not naturally, from puppies, they're not naturally mean. They are
Right.
not,
Correct.
they're often raised to be that way, particularly as
Hmm.
we've seen in the abuse of those, fight dogs and pit
Hmm.
bulls, and, and all of that. I just kind of, as an aside, one of my neighbors was walking his dog down the sidewalk just this weekend, and he had a pit bull, and I was speaking to him, but I was on the other side of the car. And but and I was talking to him, but I kept my eye on the dog. But I noticed that the dog was just as calm and gentle, and and the like. And
Hmm.
so I do see how, when you have, people who are doing damage to families, that there indeed could very well be that correlation between those that would also abuse pets. Um, the the theme this year for National Crime Victims' Rights Week is kinship. Talk to me a little bit about that, if you can, Arlene, and what it means for you.
Well, what it means for us is, that old adage, we are our brother's keeper, right? And it takes a village. It takes a village for all of us to help each other. And so, if you do know someone who is in need of help or in need of safety, or, looking for some place to, leave their pet safely while they flee a volatile situation, it's up to us to try to help. Because you're right, there's so many people who suffer in silence because they don't believe they have an out. But hopefully on Saturday, they'll identify some of the resources that can help them. And in addition to that, there's such a need for additional foster homes for pets, so you can leave your pet somewhere while you get restabilize your life.
You can leave them with Florina.
Yeah. That is
Absolutely.
true. That
just
is
just just text a photo.
true.
I'll
you
show
know,
it to Thunder and get his
Right.
approval.
of
Yep.
your French poodle, of your Pekingese, or
Mhm.
I'm digging deep here for the whole dog thing.
Right.
Um, Florina, I want you to kind of have the last word when you look back over your experiences, and as you said in the beginning, this experience has never left. On the other side, um, what would you say to them?
One of the biggest things I would say is you have to have the ability and the heart to forgive. Because if you can't forgive, it just basically causes you to be bitter. And unforgiveness it becomes a health issue for you because you're holding that bitterness inside. And I think when you're bitter, you go through life angry, that it just throws your whole equilibrium off. So one of the main things that I think anybody needs to know how to do, or anybody needs to do, is to be able to forgive the perpetrator, or whoever it is that harmed you, because they're the ones that have to live with that. I believe that you shall reap what you sow. So there's nothing I can do that God can't do better. So, even if it's a mental thing, maybe he'll give me peace so that I can rest at night, but you may not have that peace until you come to the realization that, you harmed another person, or you did something that you should not have done. So it's going to come back around to you, that's for sure. I believe that you're not going to prosper until you can do the right thing, but we have to learn how to forgive. Forgiveness. And once you get to that point, I think that also brings you to the state where you have to just accept what has happened, but you definitely need to know how to forgive.
I think that's a great way to end this conversation. Florina, you're a wonderful person.
Thank you.
And I just think that the work that you're doing for yourself and others is sorely needed. And thank you so much for your time and telling your story. Also, Arlene, thank you for your advocacy and your work. We need more Caffeys. We need more Arlenes out there as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That is the Daily Drum for this Monday, March 31st. I'm Harold Fisher.